Chapter 1. Reborn and married into Eric's family, I opened my eyes, clutching the marriage certificate my sister had stolen from me. This time, my tears weren't from grief, they were from laughter. In my past life, she had switched our arranged marriages, handing me over to a brute who beat me until I died tragically. But in this life, I was the one who shoved her into the pit of fire, marrying the commander of a battalion, a man scarred and feared for his violent reputation. On our wedding night, he sat outside our door, his body wrapped in bloody bandages. "If you think I'm too hideous, we can divorce," he said gruffly. I unbuttoned his shirt and kissed the jagged scars left by shrapnel. Every inch of these wounds is a medal of honor. It hurts me just to look at them. "Let me," before I could finish. He pinned me against the faded red wall and growled, "Stop. Keep this up, and there will be a casualty tonight." Later, with his stars on his shoulders gleaming, he smiled foolishly. "In this life, Eric, will obey only my wife." I had gone from being a barefoot village medic to becoming the top doctor in the military district. Even the man known as the King of Hades had learned how to cook soup just for me. This time, I gambled everything and won both his life and his heart. It was the start of spring. I stared blankly at the two marriage certificates lying on the table, my nails digging into my palms until blood seeped out. Alice, her lips smeared with cheap lipstick, opened and closed her mouth like a pig that had just given birth. Sister, Commander Eric's face was disfigured in an explosion during the war. He's terrifying, even in the dark. Her nails, dyed with henna, tore at Santiago's marriage certificate. "Let me marry Santiago instead, so you don't end up ruined by that brute." Suddenly, I clutched my throat. The searing pain of being burned alive in my past life surged back through my fingers. That year, she had smiled in exactly the same way when she stole my marriage. While I was beaten to death by my husband, she had pinned a red flower to her chest and strutted on stage to be honored by the county committee. Santiago's path to becoming director of the Revolutionary Committee had been paved with the dowry meant for me. "You're right, sister," I said. My hands trembled as I lifted Eric's marriage certificate, the red paper burning like fire in my palm. The scars that Commander Eric carries for defending our country, those are medals of honor. Alice's face froze, cracking like an old enamel pot. Then she lunged at me, trying to snatch the certificate. Her long nails raked across the back of my hand, leaving bloody marks. "Are you insane? Eric came back to the village last month with half his face covered in bandages. Even children wet themselves at the sight of him." I gripped the certificate so tightly the wooden table creaked and shook. The oil lamp threw harsh light onto the mud wall, and in my mind flashed the final scene of my previous life, Santiago pressing a lit cigarette into my collarbone, saying he'd use my widow's compensation to buy himself a deputy director's position. "Let go of that," my stepmother Monica barked, whacking me across the waist with a broom. "Alice is doing this for your own good. Your father already used Eric's dowry money to buy liquor. You should light a candle and thank heaven that man still wants you, worthless as you are." My grip loosened for a split second. Alice yanked with all her strength and tumbled backward onto the ground, clutching Santiago's certificate like a trophy. She hurriedly unfurled the silk cover, her eyes glowing like a starving wolf when she saw the 3 characters spelling Santiago. She didn't even notice the smile I hid behind my sleeve. In my past life, Eric's family had brought a dowry with a famed 3 rounds and a sound. This fool still thought they had hidden gold bars somewhere. At dawn, the roar of an engine shook the village entrance. Standing before the cracked mirror in our house, I pressed red lipstick onto my lips. The young woman looking back at me had the face of someone barely 20, smooth and radiant with life. In my past life, Santiago had torn this coarse cotton dress to shreds. Today, wearing it, I would march toward the stars that truly belonged to me. A jeep arrived in a cloud of dust, halting in the center of the village square. When the vehicle door opened, a collective gasp escaped the onlookers. Eric stood tall in his immaculate military uniform, as unyielding as a pine tree. The right side of his face was wrapped in blood-stained bandages, while the left revealed features so sharply defined they looked carved from stone. In the hand that once gripped a rifle, he held his military cap, his knuckles pale. "Commander Eric." I walked straight up to him. "I'm Miranda, your fiancée," he cut me off with a rough voice, turning slightly away. "You still have time to regret this." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alice smirking from behind a haystack. Without warning, I rose on tiptoe and tugged open the collar of Eric's uniform. A horrific bullet scar twisted from his collarbone to his jaw, the fresh skin still pink. In my past life, when Santiago left me covered in bruises, it was this man-owner of that scar who had scaled the wall at night to bring me medicine. "How magnificent," I whispered, brushing the scar lightly with my fingertips. I felt his entire body tense. 1,000 times better than those cowards who only know how to hit their wives. Eric's Adam's apple bobbed. Suddenly, he removed his military belt and thrust it into my hands. "If you're afraid, use this to hit me," he said, the metal buckle biting into my palm. I swore on the flag that I would never, ever raise a hand against a woman. A fake giggle floated from the haystack. Alice sashayed over, wiping false tears from her cheeks. "Sister, why keep pretending?" "Brother Eric, my sister is scared of ugly things. She even woke up crying from a nightmare last night." I slapped her across the face, so hard that the sparrows scattered from the old pagoda tree. While she stared at me in shock, I unbuttoned my own collar, revealing an old scar on my collarbone, a cigarette burn from my past life, but even in this new body, it remained etched into my skin. "Commander Eric, do you remember?" I locked eyes with him, and his pupils shrank. "Last year, during the flood, the girl you carried down from the rooftop?" His cap slipped from his fingers and hit the ground with a loud thud. Eric grabbed my wrist, and beneath his bandages, fresh blood began to seep through again. Chapter 2. Newlyweds, where affection begins to grow. That year, I had taken my stepsister's place, working on the dike, when the mud house collapsed. It was a scarred hand that dug through the rubble to save me. Later, he secretly left eggs on my windowsill, but Alice took them and claimed them as her own. "You were the girl with the blue ribbon in her hair." His voice trembled as the reopened wound bled down the side of his face, staining it a deep crimson. Suddenly, I remembered the last time I saw him in my past life, lying wrapped in bandages in a field hospital, still trying to sneak me a pouch of hawthorn candy. "Eric," I whispered, saying his name for the first time. "Today, I'm marrying you by choice. Not out of gratitude." I poked his chest, which rose and fell heavily. "Right here," I said. "Someone in a military uniform has already moved in." Just then, the morning sun broke through the mountains, casting a golden sheen over the light in his eyes. In the distance, I could hear Santiago's mocking whistle and Alice's saccharine voice calling him, "Brother Santiago." But Eric wrapped me in his military coat and helped me into the jeep, his arm trembling slightly but steady, as if he were carrying a porcelain statue of the goddess Guanine. Before the door shut, I threw Alice a cold glance. Every dirty trick she played in our past life, I would return them tenfold in this one. The jeep rattled along the mountain path, while I absent-mindedly traced the scratch marks on the third button of Eric's uniform. In my past life, after he died in battle, that bronze button had been clenched in my hand. The young soldier at the wheel kept glancing at us in the rear-view mirror until Eric shot him a look so stern it made his shoulders twitch. "Commander, are we heading straight to the unit housing complex?" he asked. "To the cooperative," I answered before Eric could. My fingers grazed the frayed seam on a sleeve. "I want to buy some cotton to make you a new pillowcase." Eric shifted stiffly closer to the jeep door. "No need. I sleep on a camp bed." When I didn't respond, he added, "You'll sleep in the inner room." I leaned toward him deliberately and inhaled the mix of soap and gun oil at his neck. In my past life, the night Santiago forced himself on me, it was Eric who led the raid on the illegal gambling den. From outside, he'd asked if I needed the women's officer called. Even then, with bandages over his face under the moonlight, his voice was that same husky tone like a guardian god. "Commander Eric," I said, grabbing his worn belt buckle. "You said I could whip you." His thigh muscles tensed immediately. I laughed softly. "Buy me some milk candies and I'll forgive you." The Jeep jolted to a stop in front of the cooperative. As Eric stepped down, he accidentally knocked over an enamel wash basin near the door. The shopkeeper peeling sunflower seeds snickered. Well, did Commander Eric just get married? His face is redder than wedding silk. I stood on tiptoe and pulled the fabric ration coupons from the inner pocket of his uniform, letting my fingers deliberately brush the edge of his burning ear. "Half a kilo of White Rabbit candies and 6 feet of navy blue cloth," I said. "And 2 enamel basins with the double happiness symbol," I added. Eric suddenly spoke up. "Make them aluminum so they won't break if dropped." He glanced at the bruises on my wrist left by Monica and laid 2 industrial coupons on the counter. And a thermos bottle with peony print. On the way back, the Jeep was stuffed to the brim. I hugged the thermos tightly, humming a Yimming folk tune. Then, Eric broke the silence. "You don't have to try to please me." His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly the veins in his arms bulged. "Once I recover, I'll apply for a divorce." "Eric," I said, turning his face toward me by the chin. "What do you think I'm after?" I stared into his eyes. "They say you were the fearsome war god on the battlefield, and yet you can't even look your wife in the eye?" The Jeep swerved down a forest path, startling a flock of sparrows into flight. A vein pulsed visibly at his temple. Without warning, he tore off the bandage. A raw, twisted scar stretched from his brow bone to the corner of his mouth, like a centipede crawling across his tanned skin. I stared at it, captivated. "You can still leave," he said. "Being with me means bullets, gossip, and if we have children, raising them in barracks." I cut him off with a kiss. The salt of blood and the bitterness of antiseptic mingled on our lips. He was so stunned that he smacked his head against the door with a loud thud. Licking my bloody lip, I smiled. "Commander Eric, were you this much of a coward on the front lines?" Night was falling when we reached the family housing district at the base. The sublieutenant's wife, still peeling seeds by the fence, said, "They say Commander Eric married an angel." As I stepped down, I offered her the White Rabbit candies. "Try some wedding sweets, sister." From the corner of my eye, I saw Eric standing stiff as a statue, holding 2 thermoses, his ears red as tomatoes. The new house was a mud hut with old newspapers pasted to the windows. As I turned around, feeling for the bricks in the dim light, I bumped into his chest. Eric lifted an enamel cup in surrender. "I'll sleep in the outer room." "If you go, I'll tie you to the bed," I warned, spreading out the new cotton fabric. "Come, let me change your bandages." Under the kerosene lamp, the festering wound looked even more gruesome than it had in daylight. I soaked a cotton swab in white liquor and began to clean the pus and blood with delicate care. "If it hurts," I said, "bite this." I rolled up a military towel and held it near his mouth, but he turned his head. "Do I look like some green recruit you can fool?" But before he could finish, a low grunt of pain escaped his throat. Sweat dripped from his Adam's apple and slid down his neck into his uniform. I leaned closer and blew gently over his fluttering lashes. "You don't have to be strong with me." By the time I finished redressing his wound, it was already midnight. Eric curled up in his uniform on the camp bed. I picked up the new pillow I had sewn and slipped in beside him. Eric bolted upright, as if jolted by electricity. "Don't be reckless," he muttered, his voice rough. "Still scared I'll eat you alive, Commander Eric," she teased, resting her hand on his chest, which thudded like a war drum. From afar, the bugle for lights out echoed across the base. She lay there, counting the beats of his heart, waiting. But instead of answering, he yanked the blanket over her like wrapping a dumpling. "Sleep. I'll teach you how to shoot tomorrow." At dawn, the corn porridge bubbled gently on the stove. She crouched by the door, sorting through wild greens, when a military canteen appeared beside her shoulder. Eric's deep voice drifted from behind. "We're heading to the clinic for your shots. On the way, we'll visit your family." A pause. Santiago's house is near the barracks. Her hand trembled as she reached for the canteen. In her past life, the day she returned home after their wedding, Santiago had kicked her into the pigsty, yelling that her dowry was worthless. And now, Eric was loading gifts into the jeep: 2 cans of malted milk, a slab of ribs wrapped in festive red paper, and a floral bolt of cloth fresh from the co-op. "This is too much," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "It'll look like you're delivering a gold bar." Eric draped his military jacket over her shoulders and calmly buttoned it up to her chin. "You're worth it." As soon as they entered the village, the sounds of chaos erupted: shrieks, sobs, and the thud of wood hitting flesh. Outside Santiago's house, a crowd of gossiping women had gathered. Alice, hair disheveled and filthy, was kneeling on a washboard while her mother-in-law, Sandra, struck her with a thick firewood stick. "Lazy girl. You can't even gather grass for the pigs, and you want white bread?" "Santiago!" Alice screamed, throwing herself toward him with tear-streaked cheeks, showing bruises on her arm. "Your mom's going to kill me." Santiago responded with a swift kick, knocking her into the mud, then snuffed his cigarette out on her hand. "I haven't even found the money I lost yesterday, and you're whining like it's your funeral?" Miranda gripped the door handle so tight her knuckles turned white. In her last life, these very hands had been plunged into boiling water by that man. Suddenly, Eric reached over and covered her eyes. "Don't look," he said. "I'll fetch the production chief." "No need." She leaned down and bit the corner of his uniform pocket, pulling out the steel pen he always carried. "Let me borrow this." Pushing through the crowd, she arrived just as Sandra was yanking Alice's hair, shoving her face into a slop bucket. Miranda stomped down on a burning stick, then drove the pen into Sandra's palm. "Article 32 of the new marriage law," she said calmly, her voice sharp as steel. "Abusing family members is punishable by up to 3 years in prison." Sandra's beady eyes widened. "Who do you think you're scaring?" "It's a mother-in-law's sacred right to discipline her daughter-in-law." "Is that so?" Miranda flipped Alice's blouse collar up, revealing whip marks still seeping blood. "These alone are worth 5 years in jail." The sun glinted off the pen's cold surface. Yesterday, the Revolutionary Committee was looking for an example. Care to volunteer? The crowd scattered like startled birds. Just then, Eric arrived, dragging Santiago by the collar. His legs trembled as Eric stomped on his ankle with his military boot. "Abusing the family of a military officer," Eric growled. "That's an aggravated offense." The red star on his shoulder flashed so brightly that Sandra had to squint. Alice suddenly latched onto Miranda's leg, weeping. "Sister, take me with you." Her nails dug into Miranda's trousers, though her eyes were shamelessly fixed on Eric. In her past life, she'd begged the same way, only to sneak into Santiago's bed the moment Miranda gave her shelter. "Mother always said a married daughter is like spilled water," Miranda said coldly. She yanked her leg away and pulled a can of malt milk from her bag. "But maybe," she said with a smirk, shaking the can, "if you make your mother-in-law a cup every day, she might let you eat." Sandra's gaze locked onto the can. In times like these, malted milk was more valuable than sesame oil. Last year, the village secretary's wife only got 1 spoonful after childbirth. Miranda shoved the can into Sandra's greasy apron. "Dear-in-law," she said with a mock smile, "I'll leave my sister in your care." On the drive home, Eric gripped her shoulders tightly. "You knew they were this cruel?" he asked, brows furrowed like storm clouds. "Last night, you talked in your sleep. You called Santiago's name 17 times. She nearly choked. As the jeep bounced along the gravel road, she toyed with the brass buckle on his belt. "Eric, are you jealous?" she teased, leaning close enough to feel the sweat on his nose. "What I actually said was, may Santiago never die peacefully." They weren't even back yet when she spotted Monica standing under the old acacia tree at the village entrance, craning her neck to peek inside the jeep. When she saw only 2 packets of brown sugar, her face immediately soured. "Ungrateful brat. While Alice eats weeds and roots, you strut around dressed like a rich lady." Eric suddenly honked the horn, startling Monica so badly she fell backward into the dirt. Stepping down, his boots thudded against the ground, kicking up dust. He tossed the ribs and floral fabric onto the grinding stone. "Your family received 200 yuan as dowry for this marriage," he declared, pulling out a red-stamped ledger. "According to regulations, you should have handed over a sewing machine coupon." Monica's face turned purple like raw liver. In Miranda's past life, that money had been used to buy Alice a job. When Miranda was beaten, she couldn't even get a proper blanket. Now, she traced the steel stamp on the coupon and suddenly burst out laughing. "Mother, I'll keep this for when Alice gets remarried." On the way back, she rested her head on Eric's shoulder. He sat stiff as a board, his Adam's apple bobbing with tension. "Hey, do you want a sewing machine?" he asked. "I want you," she whispered, snuggling into his chest. "Stomping a sewing machine isn't as nice as hugging you. You're much warmer." The jeep skidded to a stop on a narrow trail, startling wild ducks from the reeds. Suddenly, Eric pulled out a bundle wrapped in layers of cloth. Carefully, he unwrapped it to reveal a silver bracelet. "I found this on the battlefield if you think it's bad luck." She slid it onto her wrist without hesitation. The silver bangle, adorned with twin lotus blossoms, jingled softly as it settled against her skin. She unfastened the top clasp of his uniform and pressed a kiss to his Adam's apple. "Eric, next time you can give me a bullet casing. If it's from you, I'll love it." Without warning, he swept her up into his arms and strode toward the family housing block like a soldier charging into war. Behind them, the sublieutenant's wife hollered with laughter. "Captain Eric's running like he's headed to the front lines." She buried her face in the crook of his neck, giggling. Beneath the scent of soap, there was a faint metallic trace his wound had reopened. Back home, she straddled his waist to change the dressing. The new skin beneath the gauze was as soft as a baby's. Leaning down, she kissed the scar tenderly. "It's almost healed." Suddenly, Eric gripped the back of her neck, his breath hot against her skin. "Miranda, who are you really?" From a distance, the rattling cough of a tractor engine pierced the air. Santiago's rusty vehicle came to a stop right outside their yard. "Captain Eric, your woman's cheating on you." Chapter 4. False Accusations, Clever Counter. Santiago's hoarse, drunken shout made the paper on the window shudder. Miranda, still straddling Eric, nearly toppled off. He caught her by the waist and sat up, the red ribbon from her hair tangled in the folds of his military trousers. "Captain Eric's got horns on his head," Santiago bellowed, waving a sweat-stained man's shirt like a flag as he stomped through the courtyard. "I saw that slut sneaking into the reeds with my own eyes." That filthy, torn shirt with a hole under the armpit was the same one she had mended for kitchen chores just 2 days ago. Eric, in the middle of buckling his belt, suddenly shoved her into the wardrobe. "Don't come out." His eyes flared crimson as he gripped the belt like a wolf about to pounce. The end door slammed open against the wall. Santiago was reaching for her underwear on the line when Eric landed a brutal kick to his chest, sending him sprawling. With his boot, he crushed Santiago's wrist to the ground. Eric slowly twisted his heel into the man's hand. "Which I saw it. The left. My left eye." Santiago screeched in pain. "Yesterday, at the riverbank." WK's belt cracked across his face, blood spraying onto the laundry line. "Yesterday afternoon, the entire Revolutionary Committee was reviewing policy documents." "Which riverbank, exactly?" Miranda clamped a hand over her mouth inside the wardrobe, struggling not to laugh. In her past life, this same scumbag had spread rumors that she was sleeping with the militia captain, and Eric had defended her just like now. Only back then, after wrecking Santiago's house, Eric spent the night training alone at the firing range until dawn. "I have proof." Alice suddenly burst into the courtyard, waving a crumpled accusation letter. "Someone saw my sister bringing food to the old reactionary in the stable." But the moment she caught Eric's glare, her voice died in her throat. Miranda pushed open the wardrobe door. "It was Huanglian Su," she said coolly. "For dysentery." She tossed her rural doctor's certificate onto the table. And you, dear sister, how were those abortion pills I prescribed for you? A wave of gasps rippled through the courtyard. Alice clutched her belly and stumbled back, only for Sandra to grab her hair and slap her hard. What bad luck. You're pregnant, and you still dare to slander a soldier's wife. Santiago tried to escape in the chaos, but Eric tied him to the well crank with his belt. Comrades, bear witness. Today we hold a proper public criticism session. As militiamen dragged Santiago and his mother onto the platform, Miranda quietly bandaged Eric's fresh wound. Santiago had slashed him with a sickle. Still playing hero, she murmured, dabbing at the cut. The old professor lay curled in the hay, coughing blood. Miranda pulled out the penicillin she had hidden, but he pushed her hand away, trembling. Don't risk it, I won't drag you down with me. I already copied the entire barefoot doctor's manual you taught me. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the official seal from the public health station. I'm certified now. It's legal for me to treat you. By the time they returned home, the morning dew had soaked the hems of her pants. Eric stood beneath the acacia tree, motionless like a statue. She ran into his arms. Eric, she whispered, unfastening his jacket through her tears. Are we really going to be a family now? Without answering, he scooped her up and carried her toward their quarters. The request was approved, he murmured, pressing his Adam's apple to her forehead. You can't run anymore. Just before dawn, the scent from the kitchen roused her from sleep. Eric stood stirring corn porridge while cakes toasted along the edge of the pan, releasing a mouth-watering aroma. She tiptoed up behind him and pinched his waist. Who would have thought the mighty Captain Eric could cook? His hand trembled. Sankate's spoon fell into the pot, splashing boiling broth. She dodged, laughing, bumping into the flour-dusted table. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of a pale scar stretching across his chest. That scar, she began, but her question was cut short by a frantic pounding at the door. A young soldier shouted breathlessly, Captain, your sister-in-law has been accused of aiding the enemy. Chapter 5. Dangerous Crisis, Unshakable Loyalty. The corn porridge still bubbled in the pot, but Olivia's shrill voice had already pierced through the walls. She gave Western medicine to the spy in the stable. I saw it with my own eyes. Miranda's hand trembled around the spatula. Memories of being bound to the public humiliation stage in the commune surged through her like a tidal wave. Eric removed his apron, wiping his hands on his uniform, leaving greasy smudges like shadows. Go to the back room, he said, nudging her toward the bedroom. Third loose brick under the bed. She clung to the doorframe, watching his back straight, immovable like a fortress. Olivia burst in, waving half a box of penicillin and screaming as Revolutionary Committee members ransacked drawers and closets. When they yanked down the floral curtain, Eric placed his hand calmly over a sealed, confidential envelope. Where's your search warrant? These are special times. Search first, explain later, the bald officer barked, spitting on their marriage certificate. Is Captain Eric shielding the family of a spy? Under the bed, Miranda's fingers found the cool brick and retrieved a hard folder. Beneath her rural doctor certificate lay a red-stamped document from the Epidemic Control Center and the battlefield first aid manual the professor had once given her. From the other room came the shattering crash of porcelain. Someone had disarmed Eric's gun. I ran out, clutching the medical certificates in my hand, just in time to see Olivia slipping a syringe into my doctor's bag. Stop, I shouted, yanking an ampoule from her sleeve. Director, have you ever seen a spy use veterinary medication to kill someone? The label veterinary use only gleamed under the sun like a blade. Olivia's face turned ghostly white. In my past life, she had used this same trick to get the military doctor suspended. But this time, she pulled it 10 years too early. I handed the syringe to Eric. This substance causes full-body necrosis if injected into a human. Please submit it to the Public Security Bureau. Liar! Olivia shrieked and lunged at me with her nails out, but Eric restrained her with a swift motion of his belt, binding her hands behind her back. The Revolutionary Committee left in silence, heads bowed. By now, The soldiers' wives had formed a wall of onlookers around the chaos. One of them burst through the crowd, breathless. "Sister, hurry, look at my Tidan." The little boy lay limp on a straw mat, his face flushed, his throat wheezing for air. I peeled back his eyelids. Acute laryngitis. He needs an emergency tracheotomy. Panic spread through the crowd. The older women began to pray. "Get white liquor, a blade, and a bamboo straw." I ripped my ribbon from my hair and set it to boil. "Eric, hold him." As the blade sliced into the boy's windpipe, his father raised a stick, ready to strike, but Eric caught his wrist effortlessly. "My wife is saving a life," he growled. His shoulder brushed my forehead, and the mingled scent of sweat and blood grounded me. A thick plug of phlegm burst out of the straw, and Tidan began to wail. I collapsed into Eric's arms. He wiped the blood from my face with his thumb. "Your stitching technique is better than the base hospital's." "I practiced last year helping a sheep through a difficult birth," I teased, blowing deliberately on his neck. "Want to try it too, Captain Eric?" His Adam's apple jumped, and he gently lifted me onto the wooden table. The night's just right for a trial run. That night, Eric crouched by the stove, feeding logs to the fire. I waved the sealed medical case behind his back. The professor's fillet spin officially stamped by the committee. He spun around and pinned me against the rice barrel. "Do you know how dangerous everything you did today was?" I touched his throat softly. "I do. But as long as you're here, I'm not afraid." The fire crackled beside us, and his eyes were black as midnight. Without a word, he lifted me again and kicked open the bedroom door. Our marriage certificate fell from the wall, conveniently covering the peephole Olivia had been spying through. "Eric," I gasped, clinging to his sweat-damp shirt. Outside, but he slammed the bolt shut and unbuttoned my blouse slowly, murmuring, "Let her hear it." Moonlight washed over the faded red character for happiness on the wall. I sank my teeth into his shoulder, drawing blood. Eric groaned, gripping my wrist, swallowing every breath and whimper I gave him. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed in the yard. Olivia stood with a broken piece of ceramic pressed to her throat. "Are you done with the theatrics?" Eric muttered as he threw on his uniform. His scar glinted coldly in the moonlight. "The theater troupe leaves tomorrow. You want to head straight to jail instead." The shard clattered from her hands. I stepped into the doorway, draped in Eric's military jacket, a smile curling on my lips. "Sister, your performance is better than taking Tiger Mountain by strategy." I raised the medical certificate again. "But the professor is now my official patient. If you touch him again," Olivia turned to flee, slipping on her own spilled pig's foot stew and tumbling headfirst into the chicken coop. The whole camp exploded into laughter. Eric knelt to cradle my cold feet in his arms, warming them. "Do you know how to treat hysteria?" he asked. "Like Olivia's?" I tapped his chest with a finger. "There's a simple cure of Captain Eric marry me. Chases off 100 demons." At dawn, the bugle blared me awake. Eric stood in front of the mirror buttoning his jacket, the marks of my teeth still visible on his throat. I spun a scalpel between my fingers like a butterfly. "Today's lesson combat first aid?" Suddenly, he snatched the blade and, with a cold flash, the second bronze button on his jacket dropped into his palm. He placed it in mine. "For you." I tied it with a red string. It was still warm from his body, and it settled directly above the old burn scar on my chest. "This is my life button. Now it's yours." As the training field roared with new recruits, I was teaching them how to apply tourniquets. Then, out of nowhere, Eric collapsed with a muffled groan. His pant leg rode up just enough to reveal a dark, swollen wound. The ceramic shards Olivia had broken the night before they had been poisoned. "Everyone stand back," I shouted. I ripped open his trousers and plunged silver needles into his meridians to protect his heart. "Eric, if you dare die on me, I swear I'll marry someone else tomorrow." His lips were already purple, but he managed a bloody smile. With a trembling hand, he caressed my face. "Wife, just tell me the truth. If you stop breathing, I'll replace you before dawn." I yelled, jabbing his finger to draw out the poisoned blood, my tears splattering onto the bronze button he'd just given me. Chapter 6. The Truth Revealed. Wedding photos at last. Eric's lips had turned blue. I bit my tongue just to stay conscious. The sand of the training field stuck to the bloody needles, and the wooden board the soldiers had used to carry him creaked under his weight. In his burning palm, he still clutched the bronze button. To the infirmary, the subcommander roared, stomping the ground in panic. There's no time. I tore at the fabric on his thigh. Already the black poison line was creeping upward. Liquor, fire basin, and the small pouch from the bottom of my kit. Hold him down, I screamed, slicing open the abscess. Jet black blood splattered across the dirt. Eric's muscles were rock solid. He didn't utter a single sound. The subcommander's wife shrieked, "You're burning him alive." But I didn't hear her. I heated the medicinal herbs wrapped in mugwort and pressed them against the open wound. The scent of seared flesh mixed with an acrid, bitter aroma. Slowly, the black blood turned red. Eric raised his hand, brushing the sweat from my brow. "Don't be afraid," he murmured, his lips still dark, but his smile steady. "If I really don't make it when you remarry, choose someone with gentle hands," he whispered. "Shut up," I screamed, my throat burning raw. Night had fallen. The infirmary was packed with soldiers' wives who had come running the moment rumors spread. Clinging to the window frame, Olivia let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Well, the barefoot doctor killed her own patient." I hurled a blood-soaked gauze straight at her face. "Since you know so much," I hissed, "why don't you tell us where the curare poison came from?" Silence dropped like a stone. That deadly tree only grew in Yunnan, yet somehow its sap had made its way into a northern military camp. Something much darker was behind all this. Suddenly, Eric opened his eyes. "This morning's supplies arrived from the base," he wheezed and pulled half a candy from his pocket. The wrapper was palm leaf. I unwrapped the candy. A faint, bitter scent hit my nose. "Eric, are you secretly a cat?" I teased, treating his wound again. "Even with 9 lives, you're pushing it." Suddenly, he grabbed the back of my neck. The medicine bowl crashed to the floor. "That year during the flood you shouted at me like that too, and it all came rushing back." That year, he'd carried me through the wreckage in the rain. I had bitten his ear, crying, calling him a heroic idiot. Then he had come back to life, too. That night, he hadn't looked at me with suspicion but with pain. "You..." My fingers trembled as I touched the old scar on his chest. "When did you remember?" "The night you kissed my throat." His voice was rough, flecked with blood. "Everything I was too afraid to say in our past life this time. I'll say it all." Just then tires screeched outside. Olivia burst in with police. "She's hiding illegal medicine." She kicked over my medical basket. Dogwood tumbled out across the floor. "She got it on the black market." I calmly produced my herb collecting license, stamped 7 times by various communes. "Gathered during last year's malaria outbreak." Personally logged by Comrade Olivia. Then I unfolded a crumpled letter of commendation. "Shall I read what you wrote? About barefoot doctors being national heroes?" The officer turned to Eric for confirmation, but he was busy toying with the silver bracelet on my wrist. Moonlight caught the engraving inside. Gua. The keepsake he had left me before dying in our past life. "My wife hikes mountains for herbs to save the battalion money," Eric said, gently stroking my palm, still marked by needle pricks. As for espionage, he suddenly pulled out components from a dismantled radio transmitter. Did Comrade Olivia really think no one heard her sneaking this into the supply crates? Olivia collapsed to her knees, shrieking like a madwoman. As the sirens faded and Olivia was led away in cuffs, I tied a neat butterfly knot over Eric's healing wound. "Captain Eric, you sure know how to play your cards." He ripped off his bandage in one go. "With all the mugwort you burned daily, did you really think I'm made of wood?" Back in our room, I was preparing his final dose of medicine when Eric hugged me from behind. His scruffy stubble grazed the hollow of my neck. "Wife, I've been meaning to ask you something." "Forget it. Until you fully recover, don't even dream of going back to training." I meant the wedding photo, he said, pulling out a crumpled fabric coupon. What I owed you in our past life, it's time I paid it back. I glanced at the still pink scar beneath his collarbone and shoved a spoonful of bitter Coptis decoction between his lips.
Fine.
But if we go, you better smile. He nearly choked, eyes brimming with tears, but still, he smiled. The moment the photographer clicked the shutter, sunlight broke through and lit up the dimples on his cheeks. It was the first and only time I saw Eric smile across both lifetimes. Chapter 7. Evil returns, consequences follow. The developing liquid in the enamel basin rippled as I held one corner of the photo paper and watched Eric's smiling face emerge from the shadows. The curve of his lips looked like it had been drawn with a ruler so stiff it hurt to look at, so tender it made my chest ache. Harder than your award portraits, huh? I tapped the print right over his tense jawline. Captain Eric, did you wear the same face when swearing allegiance to the flag? Eric was slipping a little protective amulet into the back of the picture frame when, suddenly, he grabbed me and lifted me onto the sewing machine. Facing you is scarier than facing a cannon, he muttered. I laughed so hard, I nearly toppled into his arms until a blood-curdling scream shattered the peace outside. Alice, belly round and blood staining her dress, crashed through the bamboo fence. Sister, Santiago's going to kill me. She dropped to her knees, tearing her neckline to reveal bruises on her throat. I spotted the glint of broken glass hidden in her sleeve. Calmly, I kicked a stool toward her. Sit and talk. That bastard gambler. Alice sobbed, slapping her thighs like an opera actress. He even gambled away my dowry silver bracelets. Suddenly, she grabbed my wrist. Sister, now that you're a military officer's wife, lend me 200 yuan. Just until this blows over. Eric's enamel cup slammed against the table. Even the wedding photo frame shook. I twirled a sprig of dried mugwort and smiled. Didn't your mother use my dowry to dress you up as a bride? And now you want money from me? That wasn't the same. Alice's eyes darted nervously. Santiago said it was strange how fast your husband recovered. Then he said someone reported that Captain Eric faked his injury to skip training. If they find out, the mugwort in my hand crumbled to ash. In my past life, this same rumor got Eric suspended. He ended up kneeling in the snow outside the squadron office, trying to prove his innocence. I stared into Alice's jittery eyes and burst out laughing. Was that from Santiago, or did the Revolutionary Committee's director whisper it in your ear? She jumped like a startled cat, knocking over the sewing basket. You started it. Don't blame me for fighting back. A shard of glass sliced her arm, staining her sleeve red in seconds. Captain Eric hit me. The officer's wife tried to kill me. The committee arrived faster than expected. The director's polished shoes crunched the dry herbs underfoot as he spoke with feigned concern. We'll have to assess the severity of Comrade Alice's injuries. Oh, yes, we will, I replied, seizing her arm and plunging a silver needle into the skin with surgical precision. The wound is 0.3 centimeters deep. The glass entered at a 45-degree angle. Basic manual on self-inflicted injuries. I yanked up her blouse in front of everyone. Barely 3 months and you're already showing? What are you carrying, a monster? Alice lunged at me like a madwoman, scratching and shrieking. Baron Hen. I stepped aside with ease and watched her crash headfirst into a pile of drying chili peppers. Eric suddenly spoke. Director, what's the sentence for extorting a soldier's wife? Cold sweat beaded down the man's forehead, soaking into his red armband. It's all a misunderstanding. Just a simple misunderstanding. No, it's not. I held up the medical report. Comrade Alice isn't even pregnant. I picked up a dropped pill bottle. Extended use of contraceptives has caused her irregular bleeding. And this prescription. I looked directly at the director. Didn't it come from your own desk drawer? The crowd erupted. While Eric tied the director up like a dumpling, I leaned in close to Alice and whispered, being reborn isn't a license to be more poisonous. Her pupils shrank. Her flower dyed, fingernails dug into my wrist. You always knew I planned to poison the well. I shook the small vial containing the antidote. Or that you tried to seduce Eric? Alice screamed. It was you. You planned everything. That ointment you gave me was poisoned. I couldn't help but laugh. That was cinnabar paste for hysteria. I waved the prescription slip. Didn't you say you were carrying Neza? A divine child doesn't need earthly medicine. As the director was dragged into the jeep, Alice finally collapsed to the ground. I crouched beside her, holding a bowl of bitter Coptis decoction. Do you know why I let you live this long? To torture me, so you'd see it for yourself. I pointed to the training field where Eric was leading a self-defense demonstration amid cheers and applause. In this life now you know who is truly worthy of love. Amid the clapping and laughter, Eric jogged over, reporting, "Mayam 1st Battalion fully assembled. Awaiting orders." The soldiers roared with laughter. I tugged him down by the collar and wiped the sweat from his brow. "Captain Eric, extra push-ups tonight?" His eyes darkened instantly. The bite mark on his throat flushed red. "Yes, ma'am." Chapter 8 Life or Death Crisis. Together forever, living or dead. Before dawn, Eric was summoned for a mission. But night fell, and he hadn't returned. Just as I was about to go find him, soldiers from the 1st Battalion arrived at my door, solemn-faced. They said Eric was gravely wounded. When I found him, he was covered in blood, collapsed on the ground. I tore open his shirt and began CPR, heart pounding. His ice-cold hand suddenly rested on my belly. "If there's a baby, name her Jessica, so she'll always be safe. Don't you dare." I screamed and plunged a syringe of adrenaline straight into his heart. "Eric, if you die, I'll dig you up myself." His eyelashes fluttered, and he pressed a blood-stained kiss to the corner of my lips. My wife so fierce, the soldiers rushed him to the hospital, but no one dared operate. I grabbed the scalpel without hesitation and sliced open his chest. Heartbeat restored. The nurse's shout made my hands tremble. Eric clutched my wrist suddenly. "Don't be scared." I shoved his hand away. "Move again, and I'm discharging you bare ass." The anesthesia wore off by sunset. Eric lay on the bed, stroking the edge of our wedding photo as he watched the dark circles under my eyes. "Wife, I dreamt that." "You dreamt I married someone else?" I blew on the bowl of millet porridge. "Relax. Nobody wants a guy with a scarred butt." Suddenly, he pulled open the hospital gown to reveal the healing pink scar across his hip. "Can we look now?" Sunlight filtered in through the window. I leaned in and kissed the scar. Barely passes the inspection. Chapter 9 New Chances, Loyal Hearts. The day Eric removed his bandages, I was giving vaccines to children in the family housing complex. Glass syringes boiled in hot water, and the little brats wailed while hiding behind Eric. His pockets were stuffed with candy to bribe them. Who's scarier, the doctor or me? Eric put on a stern face, trying to intimidate the kids. I raised the needle and sneered. "If Captain Eric keeps spoiling them, next time you're doing the injections." At dusk, I caught him squatting in the garden, stealing my tomatoes. I crept up behind him with wet hands. "Vegetable thief. Surrender, and I'll spare your life." He spun around and pushed me up against the fence. A ripe tomato brushed his lips. Stolen goods captured. As he bit into it, he kissed me, drinking the sweet, metallic juice straight from my mouth. And in that exact moment, Alice burst in. She was carrying a tattered bundle over her shoulder and wore a fresh bruise redder than any lipstick. "Sister Santiago sold me to an old man in the mountains." She didn't even finish before grabbing Eric's sleeve. "Brother-in-law, save me." Eric backed away faster than during any drill. Alice missed and fell straight into the chicken coop. I brushed hay off my uniform and laughed. "Didn't you say last year you'd rather die than divorce? And now you know how to beg for help? Divorce? I'll sign it myself tomorrow." She crawled over and clung to my leg. "Sister, you're a rising star in the military district. Now just say the word." I swatted her chicken shit-stained hand away. "That's your mess." "What's it got to do with me?" I handed Eric a handful of Sichuan pepper. "Lock the gate. Release the dog." The guard dog bolted from the courtyard, and Alice's shrieks sent sparrows flying from the laundry lines. Eric wrapped his arms around me from behind, his scar pressing warmly into my back. Feeling soft-hearted?
No.
Just disgusted. I flicked his chin. Noodles with chili sauce tonight? He nodded, resting his chin on my shoulder. That night, the radio crackled with breaking news. College entrance exams were coming back. I froze mid-roll. In my past life, that announcement had cost me 6 months of beatings and secret study sessions hidden in Santiago's house. Eric cracked an egg into the bowl and looked at me. Go take the exam. He traced the words, Military Medical University, onto the table with flour-dusted fingers. The commander says you've been granted direct admission. I stared at the tiny specks of flour clinging to his lashes. Aren't you afraid I'll fly away for good? Fly as high as you want, he whispered, pulling my dough cover hand to his chest. I've got the string right here. That night, thunder jolted me awake. Eric's bed was empty. I followed the soft clicking of gun parts being assembled, barefoot across the floor, and found him inserting paper into an empty bullet casing. Will? I asked, snatching the yellowed note from his hands. It was covered in tiny handwriting. His ears turned red as he reached to take it back. It was for you. Under the dim oil lamp, I saw words like hangover remedy, painkiller. Just in case I silenced him with a kiss. The bullet dug into my back. He cupped the back of my neck and deepened the kiss. Outside, rain fell steadily. Inside, the pages of the battlefield medical manual rustled gently, stuffed with my revision notes. At dawn, the commander arrived with 2 updates. Me transfer to the Military Medical University had been approved, and Eric would lead a mission to the border. Can't you stay? I whispered, hands trembling as I patched his sleeve. Your last wound hasn't. Eric dropped to one knee and slipped a ring made from a bullet casing onto my finger. When I return, we'll have a real wedding. The night before his deployment, I sewed antidote pills into the inner pockets of all his shirts. He held me in his sleep until Alice's shrieking shattered the peace once more. She stood in the courtyard waving a pesticide bottle. If Miranda won't see me, I'll die right here. I opened the window and peered out. Eric tightened his arms around me. Play dead, he muttered. After all, it's still a life. I bit his Adam's apple hard enough to leave a mark. Go deal with it yourself. He cursed in dialect as he pulled on his uniform pants. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the bed. On the day of his departure, I packed his rucksack with jars of homemade fermented chili. In front of the entire company, Eric hung a bullet casing on a chain around my neck. If things get tough, shout into this like it's me. And what good would that do? I traced the embroidered name on his chest. You better come back in one piece. I'm waiting with a proper scolding. 3 months later, I received 2 envelopes, one with my admission letter and the other with a list of fallen soldiers. When I tore open the envelope and saw Eric's name, my blood ran cold. The teacup shattered on the floor, startling the dog. Clutching the casualty notice, I ran into the rain. At the Military Medical University's admissions office, my trembling hand signed the withdrawal papers. I was heading to the border. On the rattling green military train bound for the mountains, I pulled out the bullet casing I always kept with me. The metal was warm from my body heat. Unscrewing the base, a tiny rolled note fell into my palm like a scroll. Comrade Miranda, would you accept this second-hand Eric? Chapter 10 Reunion at the Border. A happy ending. Snow at the border post reached my knees when I saw him alive. He stood leaning on a crutch beside the stone marker, his military coat flapping in the wind. The casualty list was fake, the commander muttered awkwardly, rubbing his hands together. It was to catch the last spy. I threw the crumpled letter at his chest. It rolled 3 times across the snow. Eric's crutch slipped, and he fell face first into the icy ground, sending chunks of ice splattering the commander's face. Keep acting, I snapped. Come on, keep going. I slapped away the hand he offered me. So, what if you lost a leg? You want a medal? But the tears fell before the anger did, landing squarely on the red epaulette of his uniform. Suddenly, he pulled me into the snow and kissed me hard, his lips salty with blood, silencing every sob. "Wife," he murmured, "you've gained weight." Inside the medical tent, I changed his bandages, a little rougher than necessary. The through-and-through wound on his abdomen had healed into a centipede-shaped scar stretched over his wheat-colored skin. "Did the new singer from the entertainment troupe serenade you with the pomegranate blossom?" "She did," he said, pulling out a comb carved from a spent bullet. "I used it to plug my ears." The teeth of the comb still smelled faintly of gunpowder. As I tied up my hair in front of the cracked mirror, I caught him tucking a lock of it into his backpack. His calloused palm brushed my earlobe. "Craving dumplings?" I pulled a folded diagnosis from my cotton jacket. "And pickles. I've been nauseous lately." His fingers trembled as they landed on my belly. The sniper who never missed a shot now stammered. "When did this happen? The night you faked your death?" I muttered, biting his jaw in anger. "Like you said, if it's a girl, her name's Jessica." During the spring festival, my belly round with life, I treated fresh recruits in the field clinic. Eric always sneaked away during breaks to warm the stethoscope in his hands before pressing it gently to my stomach. The young soldiers egged him on to sing. He scolded them with a stern face, but his ears turned crimson. He hugged me from behind. "When our daughter turns 1, I'll lay all my medals on the table. And if it's a boy, I'll teach him to shoot, to protect his country." He placed a dogwood fruit gently on my temple, just like his mother Invincible. When college admission notices blanketed the city walls, I received mine from the Military Medical University. That night, Eric stayed up building a crib, which shavings clung to his eyelashes. "Go study. I'll care for our daughter." On the day of my departure, he walked me to the station with baby Jessica crying in his arms. As the train whistle blew, she clung to my coat and wailed. Eric's red cap sat crooked on his head. "See? Our daughter's staying with me." The green train rumbled past white birch trees. I opened the hidden pocket of his military duffel. At the very bottom, carefully wrapped, was our blood-stained marriage certificate. On the back, scrawled in firm black ink, "Eric's life belongs to his wife alone." 7 years later, Jessica burst into the courtyard after school, waving a paper airplane just as Eric was teaching new recruits how to shoot. The little girl copied his every move enthusiastically. "Daddy, I want to be a soldier too." He clapped a hand over her mouth, laughing. "That you'll have to ask your mother first." I stood leaning against the doorway, separating medicinal herbs while the sun stretched our shadows across the ground. As the days passed, Jessica grew, and so did her love for the military. She often accompanied Eric to the training field, watching the soldiers with wide, curious eyes and mimicking their movements with childlike precision. One day, she looked up at me with surprising seriousness and said, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be like Dada's soldier who protects her country." I met her gaze, gently brushed a hand through her hair and replied, "If that's what you truly want, I'll support you. But always remember being a soldier isn't a game. It's a responsibility." Jessica nodded firmly. "I know. I'll be brave like Dad." Eric, listening nearby, had pride gleaming in his eyes. "That's my girl," he said. "I believe in you. But first school." Jessica giggled. "I promise." Years later, she kept that promise. She put on the uniform and became a soldier. The moment she slipped it on, the sunlight caught the insignias on her shoulders, making them blaze like molten gold. I stood nearby, my chest swelling with warmth. Eric stepped forward and gave her a gentle pat on the shoulder. "My daughter wearing that uniform, you are our pride." Jessica turned toward us, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Dad, Mom, I won't let you down." The golden light of dusk wrapped around us like a soft blanket. The years may be long, but love is longer still. In this life, I bet everything on the right fate, and I followed my heart.